Halo, tes tes.
What is meant by the cita is referring to the Vijana, and what is meant by the mind or Vijana is the main mind, and then the accompanying mental factors. The characteristic of the main mind is having the accompanying mental factors. The source to support the definition of the citta, and the citta is referring to the Vijana, and the Vijana with the accompanying mental factors or cetasika. The Vijana and the citta is the same, referring to the same, is explained within the text Abhidharma Samuccaya. And within the text is explained what is meant by Skanda Vijana. Skanda Vijana referring to all the citta and all the mana. And from that reference of explanation, we can obtain the source of reference that state that Vijana and citta are referring to the same thing. What is meant by the citta is something having from the capability from itself to understand the object. A citta has the ability from itself to understand an object. The citta has the capability from its own self to understand or perceive the object. For example, the object is the color blue, and chitta is something having the ability to perceive the object, the so-called the color of the blue, the color blue. And then there is a statement that the color blue is not impermanent. When the statement is that the blue is impermanent, Chitta will understand that blue is not permanent. And then with the Cetasika, with his own with the Cetasika with his own ability can perceive the statement that the color blue is impermanent. The term or the reference saying that is having his own capability is very important. By saying that the statement the color blue, the mind has the ability from itself to understand that the color is blue, the blue color. And what is meant by the chitta is something with on his own capability to understand the blue, the color blue. Now we enter the divisions of the mind, and within the mind there is the division of 6 division of the consciousness of the eye, consciousness of the ears, consciousness of the tongue, consciousness of the skin or the body, consciousness of the smell of the nose. And the 6 is the consciousness of the mind or the consciousness itself. And the consciousness itself is referring to the term of the Sanskrit term manovisana. Consciousness of the eye is when we perceive an object with the eye, and the consciousness of the sight that understand the object is a consciousness referring to the consciousness of the sight. And whatever we see with the eyes, we need the consciousness to understand what is being perceived by the sense, the eye, the sense of the eye. And then when we taste something, the consciousness of the taste, we perceive the taste with the sense of the tongue, and then the consciousness of the taste understand or what is perceived by the sense, our sense. And then when we touch something, the sense of the body, and then to what is understanding, what is perceived by the sense of the body is the consciousness of the body. And then these five related to the five senses that we have: the sights, the sense, the hearing, the touch, and the taste. And the sixth one is the consciousness of the mind or the consciousness itself. The sixth one or the consciousness itself, for example, when we think about the past or we think about the future, there's something coming up in the mind or in our consciousness. And what is perceiving what we think about the past or the future, this is called the consciousness, the sixth consciousness or the consciousness itself. This is what differentiates with the consciousness of the sense. When the consciousness of the sense of the body perceives the object, at that time the consciousness understands what is perceived by the object. And the consciousness, sixth consciousness or the consciousness itself, can understand what is happening in the past and also what is happening in the future. For example, when we think about the past, we think about in the past I did such and such thing. When we think about this, we are using the sixth consciousness or the consciousness itself, or the mind consciousness, the mental consciousness. The sixth consciousness or the mental consciousness has a wider range of object. For the sense consciousness, they can only perceive the object at the present time. For example, when our senses perceive a certain object at the present moment time, at that time we're using the sense consciousness of the sense to perceive what is captured or perceived by the sense. However, the sixth consciousness or the mental consciousness or the consciousness itself covers a wider range of objects. It covers the object of the past and also can cover objects of the future. For example, when using the mind is during eating or the food. For the food we eat, there is the color, and also there is the shape, and also there is the smell, and also there is the taste of the food. The color, the shape, the taste, and the smell. And when you perceive the objects such as food, there is not only one kind of consciousness, but it covers different kinds of consciousness. For example, when perceiving the color and the shape of the food, we are using the consciousness of the sight, or using the eyes, or consciousness of the sight. When we are smelling the smell of the food, we are using the consciousness of the smell, or the sense of the nose. And then for the object of the food, when we taste the food, we are using the consciousness of the taste, what the sense of the tongue. The consciousness of the taste, using the sense of the tongue to taste the food. Within these different kinds of consciousness, there is the combination of the taste when the consciousness tastes the food that we eat. Before we have seen the categorization with the two main categorization, the minds, the eye primary consciousness, the ear primary consciousness, the nose primary consciousness, the tongue primary consciousness, the body primary consciousness, and then the mental primary consciousness. The difference with the sense primary consciousness and the mental primary consciousness, for the five senses of primary sense consciousness, what is dominant is the sense consciousness. For the mental primary consciousness, what is being the special dominant condition is the mental is the mental fundamental primary consciousness. For each of the five senses of primary consciousness, the special dominant condition is each of the senses. For example, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. And for the mental primary consciousness, the special condition for them is the mental for the mental primary consciousness. The difference is the each have a special condition. For example, for the sense primary consciousness, each special condition is referring to the each of the sense, referring to the five senses. And the sixth one is the mental primary consciousness. The special condition for this primary consciousness is the mental itself. The I primary consciousness, what is meant by the I primary consciousness, the dominant condition for the I primary consciousness is the sense of the I. And then for the nose primary consciousness, the special condition for this primary consciousness, or the dominant condition for the nose primary consciousness, is the nose or the smell. As for the eye primary consciousness, what is meant by the eye is one part of the eye that the shape is like a kind of a flower. The sense of the eye is referring for the eye, the usual organ, physical organ of the eye. And then the special condition for the eye primary consciousness is not eye itself. It is something contained inside the organ of the eye. And for the eye organ is referring to a certain kind of the inside organ with the shape of the flower. As for the nose primary consciousness, for the ear primary consciousness is something inside the organ of the ear. It's like the skin of a tree. And then for the nose primary consciousness, referring to the sense of the nose. And then for the tongue primary consciousness, referring to the sense of the tongue. There is a certain shape within the tongue, which is referring to the organ of the tongue. And for the body primary consciousness, the dominant condition referring to the whole skin. For the tongue primary consciousness, referring for the tongue, the shape of the tongue is like the moon, the crescent moon. And then for the crescent moon of the tongue, the taste actually at the end or the edge of the tongue. That's where the sense or the taste is tasted with for the within using the tongue organ. We have discussed two kinds of main consciousness. The sense consciousness, referring to the five senses, and five senses referring to the eye, ear, etc. And then the second kind is the mental primary consciousness. What is differentiate within the two is the dominant special dominant condition for each of the consciousness. The special dominant consciousness for the five senses are the object of the senses. And then for the special dominant condition for the mental primary consciousness or the sixth consciousness is the mental or the consciousness itself. The difference between the two main consciousness is the special condition for each of the consciousness. We have to differentiate what is called the mental primary consciousness, and then with the mental consciousness. The mental primary consciousness having the special condition to create the mental primary consciousness. The mental primary consciousness having the characteristics the opposite of the sense primary consciousness. What is meant by mental factors? They having the characteristics of being the opposite. With between the mind and the mental factors, the nature having the same nature. Within the mental factors, there is 51 kinds of mental factors, and each have the distinct characteristics. Between one and the other, they cannot be found. Each one 51 mental factors. The division of the mind is accepted by all four major philosophical tenets. Even though there is a differentiation between the four philosophical tenets, but most of them, except the division of the minds, the 6 categories of the main minds. Each of the philosophical tenets, apart from dividing into the 6 minds, it can be also divided into other categories, but it will not be discussed now. For the minds, the divisions of the 6 primary consciousness and the mental factors, there is a 51 mental factors, and this the division is based on the Abhidhamma Samutaya. Among the 51 mental factors, there are 6 categories. The first one is omnipresent mental factors. The second one is object ascertaining mental factors. The root affliction, 6 of root affliction, and then secondary affliction, the 11 virtuous mental factors, and the 4 changeable mental factors. The 6 categories make up the 51 mental factors, divided into 6 divisions. What is meant by the mental factors? The mental factors referring to the consciousness with the main mind having the several accompanying mental factors is the characteristics of the main mind. Whereas the mental factors having the characteristics of the main mind following the mental factors. The characteristics of the mind having the mental factors accompanying the main mind. The characteristics of the mental factors is having the main mind following the mental factors. From this definition, we can see the difference between the mind and mental factors. For the mind, is having the mental factors accompanying the mind, and for the mental factors, having the main mind following the mental factors. Now we come to the explanation of the omnipresent mental factors. The omnipresent mental factors are 5 in numbers. The 5 omnipresent mental factors are feeling, discrimination, intention, contact, and attention. Among these 5, we come to the first one. It's what is called the feeling. The feeling is the Sanskrit is a Vedana. The definition of the Vedana is a mental phenomenon that can experience the object. The division of the mental factors of the 6th division. There is omnipresent mental factors, object ascertaining mental factors, root afflictions, secondary afflictions, virtuous mental factors, and changeable mental factors. For the first division is the omnipresent mental factors. The omnipresent mental factors is divided into 6: feeling, discrimination, intention, contact, and attention. For the first is the feeling. The Sanskrit for the feeling is the term is Vedana. The definition is a mental phenomenon that can experience the object. That can experience the object, something that is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The three kinds of feelings is something that is experienced distinctly. For example, the pleasant feeling. The feeling can experience the pleasant feeling, and then the painful. The feeling can experience the painful. This is impossible for one moment to be experienced three kinds of feeling at the same time. Each of the feeling has a distinctive characteristics, either pleasant, painful, or neither of the above. The mental factors are divided into 6 categories: the omnipresent mental factors, the object ascertaining mental factors, the virtuous mental factors, the root affliction, secondary affliction, and the changeable mental factors. Of the 6, we come into the first one, omnipresent mental factors. And the omnipresent mental factors are divided into 5: feeling, discrimination, intention, contact, and attention. We come to the definition of the first one, is the feeling or Vedana is a mental factor that can experience the object, a mental phenomenon that can experience the object. This definition explanation based on Abhidhamma Samuccaya. What is meant by his own power? When the feeling or the Vedana perceive the object to be pleasant, painful, and neutral, this mental factor of feeling can experience the object by itself with its own ability. For the other mental factors, they cannot do this kind. They cannot, for the other mental factors, they cannot experience these three kinds of feelings by themselves. Within the mental factors, there is the main mind and also the other mental factors that exist at the same time. When there is a certain consciousness arise, is the main mind, and the main mind will be accompanied by the other mental factors. The main mind and the mental factors of the feeling will experience this kind of three feelings, either pleasant, painful, or neither of the above. The one mental factors that can experience this based on his own ability is the feeling itself, the mental factor of feeling. However, for the other mental factors, they cannot experience this three kind of feeling by themselves. He has to the other mental factors are dependent on the factors of the feeling to experience the three kinds of objects. The way of the feeling function can be relatively easy to be understood. For example, the pleasant feeling. Pleasant feeling is something that we can feel, and the pleasant feeling can be divided into two: the stained pleasant feeling and unstained pleasant feeling. The stained pleasant feeling is referring to the general things. When we feel hot and then we use the aircon from the feeling of hot to become the cool, this is the stained pleasant feeling. The stained pleasant feeling will cause eventually will end up with suffering. For the second one is the painful feeling. The painful feeling is referring to the physical painful and then the mental pain. The physical painful is, for example, when we feel hot, referring to the body feeling hot, this is a physical pain. And the second one is the mental pain. The mental pain is something come from the internal mind. For example, when we think of different things, when we think of we have different kinds of thinking or the sad feeling. This can eventually end up with, for example, suicide, and also different kinds of thinking would end up with a quarrel. From the different kinds of thoughts that we have, this will cause the mental pain. For example, that businessman, when a businessman or a trader, when he doesn't have the profit, he will feel pain or suffering. And then, for example, there is a competitive person. When he feels competitive to the others, if it cannot fulfill the purpose, he can feel painful. This is included in the mental pain. For the physical pain, for example, when we are feeling hot, this is only limited on the physical pain. From the mental pain, it comes from the different kinds of thoughts we have in our minds, and from the different thoughts in our mind is all kinds of thoughts. The feeling, the all kinds of thoughts, the thoughts to compete with others, the thoughts to compete with others, the thoughts that we want to get profit and not want to get to be losing something, and this will cause mental suffering or mental pain. For example, for the feeling, we have to have some kind of confidence. We don't need. We have to feel confident, but we don't need to feel arrogant. The confident is an important trait, so we can feel that we have a confidence, not feel so down. The confident trait also needed in the Dharma or spiritual aspect. Also in the worldly life, we need confidence. The confidence is needed, whereas the arrogance or feeling elevated, the arrogance is unnecessary. The feeling can be divided into three kinds: the pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neutral feeling. The pleasant feeling can be divided into two: stained pleasant feeling and unstained pleasant feeling. The painful feeling can be divided into physical and mental. And for the neutral is neither pleasant nor painful feeling. This feeling can be divided also into two kinds: physical feeling and mental feeling. Physical feeling is the feeling coming from the sense organ, and the mental feeling is a feeling coming from the mental consciousness. There are two kinds of feeling: physical feeling and mental feeling. Physical feeling referring to the feeling that associated with one of the five of the sense organ. The sense primary consciousness are divided into five: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. When one of the feeling associated with one of the sense organ or sense primary consciousness, this is called the physical feeling. And the mental feeling, this mental feeling is associated with the mental primary consciousness. What is differentiate between the sense primary consciousness and mental primary consciousness? For the sense primary consciousness, the special cause that causes the primary consciousness is the physical organ, physical sense organ. As for the mental primary consciousness, the special dominant condition causing the mental primary consciousness is the organ of the mental. The definitions of the feeling is supported by the quotation can be found in the Abhidhamma Samutaya, and the functions of the mental factor of feeling. Just as the body sense pervades the body, likewise ignorance abides in all. For example, when we're feeling the pleasant feeling, we don't want to be separate from the happy feeling. And for example, when we experience the suffering or unpleasant feeling, we would like to be separated from the unpleasant feeling. And this feeling, when it arises, according to the types of the feeling, we would like it to stay or it would like to disappear. For the neutral feeling, the functions of the neutral feeling is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, and the function of this neutral feeling is the mental fact. The mind is not wishing to stay in the pleasant feeling nor to be separated from the unpleasant feeling. The quotation is from the Treatise of 400 Stanzas by Arya Asanga. This before it was stated the term ignorance. The ignorance is based on the quotation from the Treatise of 400 Stanzas. And now we have a questions and answer session for 15 minutes. What is meant from the organ of the mental? Not necessarily consciousness. Can be a sense consciousness or consciousness itself. The mental consciousness can be one of the 5 sense consciousness. The mental organ doesn't necessarily have to be the mental consciousness. The consciousness is divided into six. Is the review the six kinds of consciousness, and the five primary sense consciousness, and the mental primary consciousness. For example, when we hear the sound, when we see something, the what is perceiving is the eye primary consciousness. When we hear something, is the ear primary consciousness. When we smell something, is the nose primary consciousness. And then when we taste something, is the tongue primary consciousness. And then when we touch something, what is function is the body primary consciousness. The five sense primary consciousness, the characteristics is direct and directly perceiving the object. The sixth one is the mental primary consciousness, where in the Sanskrit is the term referred to the manovicana. The mental primary consciousness can be a direct perceived object, or also can also be indirect perceived object. For example, the things that being the thoughts of the past, and also the thoughts of the about the future. From the point of the science, the main focus of the consciousness is the brain, but however it's different from the Buddhist point of view. The science said that the main focus of the consciousness is located on the brain. However, this is disagreeable, because some of the consciousness are related to the brain. However, not all consciousness are related to the brain. For example, the sense primary consciousness may be related to the brain, but the mental primary consciousness not necessarily connected with the brain. For example, for a dead person, the brain is dead, but the consciousness can still function can still go on. Therefore, not all consciousness depend or focus on the brain organ only. Before we also discuss about the feeling. The feelings, for example, when we feel something pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, this is relatively easy to be understood. When we feel happy, which we know this is a pleasant feeling. When we are unhappy, this is a painful feeling. And neutral is neither of the pain pleasant or unpleasant. The question is who is feeling, who is the one who is feeling, and then we can pinpoint that this is referring to the mental factor of feeling.